More than 100 friends and admirers of Mrs. Betty Fitzgerald honored her today at Oak Park. Among those, Mayor Emery Fulmer, who called Mrs. Fitzgerald one of the city's best friends. According to Parks and Recreations Department spokesman Gene Reeder, Mrs. Fitzgerald has been instrumental in keeping much of Oak Park green. She is a resident of Montgomery who travels the world, active in many garden clubs. Miss Betty, as her friends call her, was touched when Margaret Dauber presented Mrs. Fitzgerald with a painting. Later, the crowd watched as the new Betty Fitzgerald Biblical Garden was officially dedicated. The half-acre of land will soon contain many of the fauna mentioned in the Old and New Testaments. Mrs. Fitzgerald says that throughout her travels, she's found that Montgomery is a place where beauty abounds, and in Oak Park, where she's worked so hard, nature's colors prove her right. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
Alabama ended its regular season with a good performance against Vanderbilt. A lot of the credit has to go to freshman Mike Davis. He had 26 points on the day, and you see him drive the baseline there. Alabama also did some long-range shooting like Robert Scott's 15-footer. The Tide held commanding leads, but some aggressive play on Vanderbilt's part narrowed the margin to just 10 points at the half. Vanderbilt continued that spirited play in the second period, cutting Alabama's lead to just 2 points. Here, the outlet pass results in an easy 2 points. However, Mike Davis came up with some crucial baskets and led Alabama to a 79-72 victory over Vanderbilt. Tide coach C.M. Newton had some kind words for the Alabama freshman.
Played with a lot more confidence, I thought, in terms of the offense. He really took charge offensively, and I didn't realize he had 26, Mike, or I wouldn't have substituted so much for it.
Kept him in the game when you say.
You know, I'm so used to him playing a hard ball defense and getting the basketball inside to other people, but he's come a long way for a freshman.
More than 300 members of Anchor and Compass clubs came to the capital city to expand on their theme for this year, growth, friendship, and service in the 80s. Both service organizations are sponsored by Pilot Club International, a women's civic group. Anchor Club, organized in 1952, is open to high school girls, while Compass is open to students in post-secondary institutions. It was organized in 1967. It's at state conventions like this one that each club learns from another's failures and accomplishments. According to convention co-chairman Sandra King, the local clubs are constantly involved in community service projects. The two-day convention will touch on some of these, as well as leadership, parliamentary procedure, and public relations. King says it's through these two clubs that young people learn the true meaning of friendship while helping communities with valuable service. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
Walk, what do you say, Walk? Spit up to man. On the
The Commission approved a resolution allowing a $70,000 expenditure to establish the restitution home. That resolution also agrees to a contract with the state of Alabama to staff the home. The restitution home came about as part of the Commissioner's solution to overcrowding in the county's jail. A lease is yet to be signed on the home, but county officials say they hope to have the home operable within a couple of weeks. Part of that $70,000 will be recovered by the county through rules that order each work-release inmate to pay 25% of his salary to the operation of the home. Still pending are zoning changes allowing the county to house the inmates at the home. In other business, the Commission bogged down in discussion over a proposed change to land plats. The change would add wording to the plat explaining that the county doesn't accept road maintenance responsibilities except by resolution. Proposals to resolve the problem will be talked over in a March 6th meeting of engineers, contractors, financiers, lawyers, and county commission representatives. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
What do you feel James and Mary Ann Zulovich say local Board of Education officials have yet to supply them with what they feel are acceptable answers to some challenging questions about court-ordered busing. So the couple has been distributing petitions seeking information about the present Montgomery school districts. They say they'll present the petitions to Justice Department officials in the near future. Two of the Anzulovich's children are bused almost 7.5 miles to Harrison Elementary School, even though there are 6 other schools closer to the Anzulovich home. The family is planning to move. James Anzulovich says his family needs more space, but the busing issue has been a major influence in their decision.
We are not a single racial area at all, and that we have to keep being bused long distance to achieve an integration which is getting worse and not better.
The Anzulovich family's dilemma isn't an isolated case. Questions concerning integration and busing are still being raised all over the country. Mary Anzulovich says moving to another school district will solve their current dilemma, but she says she'll continue her efforts to eliminate long-distance busing. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
The airport authority heard from a representative of Ocean Airways of New Jersey, a commuter airlines interested in filling in the gap which we left by Eastern's announced pullout June 1st. Ocean has picked up a lot of business following the 1978 Deregulation Act when larger airlines leave smaller markets. The Airport Authority Board voted on several measures in hopes of stopping Eastern from leaving and to make up the approximately $100,000 it will lose annually if it can't. Among them, authorization to talk with several airlines about expanding or starting service to Montgomery, permission to meet with the state's congressional delegation in hopes of amending the Deregulation Act, and permission to check into the feasibility of hiring Washington legal counsel to file a protest with the Civil Aeronautics Board against Eastern's plan. The board also adopted a policy allowing construction of private hangars at Danley Field. They've already been contacted by the Winn-Dixie Company and the state of Alabama about such construction. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News, Danley Field.
Newport. Newport.
Thank you. Dr. Carr, I think, responded to the point concerning future plans in a fabulous way. It's extremely important consideration, I think, to keep in mind reference rules about school programs.
Ms. King, this is Alfred Seawright from Senator Kennedy's Presidential Campaign Office. Senator Kennedy will be in Montgomery Wednesday, February 27 at 6:30 p.m., giving a speech at Chicago High School Auditorium. Do you think you and your family and friends will be able to come?
Staff
Thank you
members
very
at
much.
Kennedy's Montgomery campaign headquarters are working hard to ensure a big turnout for the senator's arrival tomorrow. This will be Kennedy's first visit to Montgomery. An earlier visit was canceled, and his backers want everything to go well. Willie McQueen, Kennedy's Montgomery County coordinator.
Busy organizing cars to go to the airport, organizing drivers to drive their cars. Plus, we've been passing out a lot of literature asking for more volunteers because we've been busy coming up to the last minute for the senator.
Kennedy will arrive in Montgomery shortly after 4 p.m. He'll pay a visit to Governor James at the Capitol, meet with a delegation of ministers at the Bethel Baptist Church, and then address a rally at Carver High School at 6:30, all in hopes of making a credible showing against President Carter in the March 11th primary. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
The Alabama Marketers Association and the Independent Oilmen's Association of Alabama claim the proposed 5% tax on gasoline wholesale prices could increase the cost of gasoline in Alabama by 4.5 cents per gallon. Fred Long, Executive Vice President for the Marketers Association, says contrary to Governor Fob James' theory, such a tax would have to be passed on to the consumer because the petroleum markets could not absorb the tax.
The reality of the issue is that this tax would have to be passed on to the consumer because profit margins would not allow petroleum marketers to absorb such a tax.
Long further contends that the elimination of the state sales tax exemption on fuel would cost the consumer an additional 4 8/10 cents per gallon. And since there is no ceiling proposed, the actual amount of the taxes would increase as the price of gasoline went up. Long said gasoline will probably sell for $1.50 a gallon soon, and the tax on that would be 6 cents a gallon. The petroleum marketers and independent oilmen's associations claim the elimination of the state sales tax exemption on gasoline will cost Alabamians more than any other gasoline tax legislation under consideration. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Police had to block off a section of Union Street to accommodate the placard-waving crowd that couldn't make it into the meeting. And inside, the jam-packed Highway Department building auditorium was the scene of cheers supporting the Medicaid and jeers sharply criticizing Governor James. This afternoon's public hearing was just one step in the required process to phase out the state's deficit-ridden Medicaid program. Medical Services Administrator Hope Kearns told the crowd that services mandated by federal law will be discontinued when the last of the program's money has been committed, an action that should occur in mid-June. Kearns strongly urged support of Governor James' programs to save Medicaid. And then it was the people's turn.
Now we wonder just what the state of Alabama considers need.
Over 1,000 will be put out of intermediate care facilities if Medicaid payments for this service are dropped.
Why do they take money out of my husband's payday every week, $40 to $50, and we don't have no money in this place here to pay for it with, for Medicaid, Medicare? I just can't see that.
These are just a few of the people that wouldn't fit into the Highway Department building auditorium for the public hearing. But as evidenced by the overflowing crowd in the auditorium and these gathered on the Capitol steps, a lot of people will be upset if the Medicaid services are cut just a mere 34 days from today. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News at the state capitol.
Many members of the House, like Representative Hugh Bowles, urged the legislature to make a commitment on solving the Medicaid problem. Others talked more about revenue measures for Medicaid. House Speaker Joe McCorkadale took time to explain to the membership just where the Medicaid legislation is.
Every effort will be made to give these pieces of legislation priorities when they are reported from committees.
Representative Lee Pegues of Marion introduced a 13-bill Medicaid package for the James administration. The bills would change some of the current regulations, which could save the state money. The bills were introduced even though they're in violation of federal regulations. The dog track issue came up again. Representative Shelby Dean Ward of Opelika, who opposed the Macon County dog track, was successful in changing the House rules so future bills dealing with parimutuel betting would automatically be treated as general rather than local bills. In the Senate, 2 constitutional amendments raising state income tax revenue for the general fund were placed at the top of the special order calendar. The bill, sponsored by Senators Finus St. John of Coleman, would raise the corporate income tax and remove federal taxes and exemption on state income tax returns. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The letter urges industrial relation workers to ask for a commitment from their legislators on 3 major administration bills and 7 pieces of legislation directly affecting industrial relations. One of those would give police powers to agency investigators. Another would increase fees to employees for job transfers. The William Davis letter was 2 pages long and dated February 15th. Davis today was ordered by Governor James's administrative officer to retract the letter immediately. State Administrator Bob Davis told the Industrial Relations Director the February 15th letter could be taken as coercion, leaving the governor open to criticism.
Governor James clearly told employees when he took office that no executive branch officer would be allowed to lobby the legislature. In his letter, William Davis violated that rule, and Davis is reported by Capitol sources to be in hot water with Governor James, not only for the letter, but for other problems. Bob?
Retired Admiral Jeremiah Denton spent less time talking about his years in a North Vietnamese prison camp than about the changes he found when he returned.
And I get out of the airplane at NAS Norfolk after almost 8 years away from this country, and I'm going to the hospital at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's adult bookstores and X-rated movies and massage parlors and the whole bit, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it even meant.
Denton says the new morality, which is so highly touted in America, is nothing more than the old immorality. He says the growing influence of principles embracing self-gratification are the cause of several U.S. problems, including inflation and foreign crises. Denton says the country needs to solve its identity crisis and reassert its power over the Russians. Denton claims one way to get Americans back on course is to return to an enforcement of the 10 Commandments. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Be quite an experience, Coach, putting a team together like this.
Well, yes, it is. The biggest experience you get is when you find all these different talents coming from all over the world, and you have to mesh them into a team in approximately 3 weeks. So it's quite a chore, but it's one of the chores I enjoy doing.
Good players.
Well, I think so. We just have so many experienced players, and in this type of tournament that we're going to have, experience plays a great deal because you can take advantage of the rules when you know the rules and have played the rules. When you come from NCAA and go right into this type of rule affair, then you have a tendency to wait on the referee to hand you the ball, handle the ball on violations.
These international rules you're going to play on?
International rules, and most of the experience will show in that time. But when you talk about inexperienced talent, yes, we have it. But when you, I don't know how. So that means that we're a question mark.
What do you know about the Army, the Navy, and the Marines? Anything?
You know, that's a typical question. The Marines I know very little about because the Marines, I saw the list came in today. I know one player that is a returnee, but that's basically all I know about the Marines. And we play them first, as you know. The Army, they're traditionally tough. They don't turn over personnel too often, and mainly because of the way they handle their team. And I think, I'm not knocking it, I think it's a good deal. They keep the team intact for the duration of a young man is in the service. And maybe 7 or 8 of them will be stationed at Presidio, San Francisco, and they play together all year. So that's a plus for them. But traditionally, the Army is tough because they seem to go about the business of finding that key athlete when he comes into service, and they position him around the world. They know where he is. They can put a hand on him and say, hey, get on out to San Francisco. You're a part of the All-Army team.
You're driving in the middle lane because you have the green arrow, and suddenly you meet another car coming toward you in the same lane. The other car is attempting to make a left turn, but from his side, the traffic light shows a red X. City traffic engineers say this situation is common.
They get in the center lane going against the red X, which means they're doing it with a car coming directly at them. This type of thing we're trying to stop.
To eliminate the traffic hazard, Chambliss says the city will be installing a new traffic system, which includes a yellow arrow. During peak hours, Norman Bridge Road's center lane will still be used as a through lane into and out of the downtown area. But after rush hour, the yellow arrow will flash, meaning the center lane is a turn lane only. The city engineers hope the system will lessen the chances of head-on crashes. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
From like Alphaland and
Estes says although the president won by a slimmer margin in New Hampshire than in Iowa, the Alabama re-election campaign won't change that much.
we're going to continue the same plan that we started with, and that is to, of course, establish committees on the state and local levels, which we've already done in Alabama and in Montgomery County, and also to contact as many people as we possibly can by telephone and canvassing to get out the Democratic vote on March the 11th for the president.
Estes says the New Hampshire results show that voters support the president's policies and judgment in what he calls one of the nation's most difficult times. In the next 2 weeks, the president and his son Chip are scheduled to visit Montgomery while campaign workers continue what Estes calls a grassroots effort to re-elect Jimmy Carter to the White House. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
House Bill 540 started out in the Ways and Means Committee as a bill giving teachers a pay raise from the state's general fund. Then Representative Walter Owen, chairman of the committee, offered a substitute which would give the governor discretionary powers over a lot of money. It also allows the governor to declare an emergency situation and then to transfer unspent money to agencies where money is needed. But realistically, Owen says only about $30 million will probably be available. The plan, which passed the committee unanimously, would automatically terminate at the end of this fiscal year. All agreed this was only a temporary measure. Dr. Paul Hubbard, Executive Secretary of the Alabama Education Association, says the plan is also unearmarking.
Well, a rose is a rose is a rose, Dennis. It absolutely and unequivocally is unearmarking.
House Speaker Joe McCorkadale says he's discussed the plan with the governor as a way to help the state out of the current Medicaid crisis.
I think it was very evident today that we have the money available to use in these crucial issues and crises and emergencies, but we're helpless to use it as long as it's tied up in various funds.
House Bill 540 has been called the first positive step toward coping with the current Medicaid crisis, but that positive nature may turn into controversy once the bill reaches the floor of the Alabama House of Representatives. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
For his accomplishments in California.
Though John Connally got only 2% of the vote in New Hampshire, his supporters say the former Texas governor's campaign is just beginning. In a news conference at the state capitol, Connally's Alabama campaign chairman predicted the Republican race in the South will be a two-man contest between Reagan and Connally. He says New Hampshire proved that George Bush is not the front runner some made him out to be.
The national news media has elevated George Bush with a tremendous bubble of publicity during the last month. This publicity has had a big effect in Alabama as elsewhere. But the Bush bubble has burst.
Collins says support for Connally exists, but the news media simply haven't spotlighted it. He's sure Connally will make a strong showing in the southern primaries, and Collins says those wins will get the nation's attention. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Let me just say I'm delighted to be in Alabama. Appreciate the very opportunity to return to your state. I've been here on a number of different occasions over the period of years in the past. I've worked closely with your representatives in the United States Senate. I come here to ask for help and the support. I'm hopeful that we can get some support for the selection process for the delegates to the National Convention. I find that the people here in Alabama, as well as in other parts of the country, are concerned most of all about the rate of inflation, high interest rates. I don't believe that the current administration is dealing effectively with these problems, and the failure of dealing effectively with these problems is measured in human suffering. Elderly people that can't make ends meet, that are retired, working people that can't buy homes, young people that are unsure whether they're going to be able to continue their education. I've offered programs to try and deal with these issues. I'm hopeful we can implement those programs or have serious discussion and debate on them during the course of the campaign.
A large, responsive crowd packed the Carver High School auditorium to hear Senator Edward Kennedy. Kennedy told them, like President Carter wants to get his share of the Massachusetts vote, Kennedy wants his share of the Alabama vote.
Jimmy Carter was saying, let's not vote for Kennedy just because he's from that section of the country. So I'm coming to Alabama and say, don't just vote for Jimmy Carter because he's from here. Give Kennedy a little of that hospitality and a little of that generosity as well.
Kennedy attacked President Carter's failure to stop inflation, particularly its effect on the black population. And he says 4 years of economic failure has left only one choice:
to impose the controls across the board on prices, wages, profits, interest rates, dividends, and rents. And it is easy for the well-off and the well-paid to object to controls. They are not making cruel choices between heat for their apartments and food on their tables.
Throughout his address, Kennedy quoted Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and urged the audience to help him carry on King's work in attaining true equal rights for all people.
And let us dream as Martin Luther King dreamed, and we can reach the reality of the dream. And in the Alabama primary, walk with me to the polling places that were closed to you 25 years ago. And together let us resolve that we shall keep on marching. Together let us march again the way we marched before. Thank you.
Michael Jones, WSFA TV News at Carver High School.
Delighted and honored to have a chance just to pay my respect to the governor. We're only here in Alabama.
Ted Kennedy did not get Governor Fob James' endorsement. He said that's not what he came for. He talked with the governor about the financial crisis of Alabama's Medicaid program and said that a national health insurance plan could relieve states of that type of burden. After the courtesy call and the usual handshaking, Kennedy went to Bethel Baptist Church, where he addressed Montgomery area ministers. He said Alabamians have asked him to comment on the qualifications of 2 black nominees for federal judgeships in Alabama. He's chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which will conduct confirmation hearings. Kennedy said he wanted to give all nominees fair consideration and that he rejects any efforts to discredit the candidates. Kennedy frequently referred to the civil rights movement and his family's part in it.
And I say to those voices today that say that it cannot be done, that we cannot fulfill the dream and the goal of this great and blessed land, I say those voices should be rejected, and that we together shall overcome. Thank you.
From Bethel Baptist Church, Kennedy went to a rally at Carver High School. Michael Jones has a report on that rally.
Both teams were a bit shaky at the start of tonight's ballgame. Auburn got the better of it in the turnover department, but was unable to cash in at the hoop. It was Georgia that jumped to the early lead. LaVon Mercer goes inside on this play. It made the score 17-10. The Dogs built a 9-point lead. Then Auburn started to play more aggressively, both on offense and defense. Bubba Price gave the Tigers the lead on this steal, 29-27. Sonny Smith and company was able to nurse that lead to 5 points at the half, 36-31. Auburn continued to play well in the second half. This Bobby Camage bucket gave the Tigers a 12-point lead. Auburn stayed in the plus column by playing with a great deal of hustle. Despite a respiratory ailment, Frank Poindexter scored 18 points tonight. That offset a 23-point effort by Georgia's Terry Fair. The Tigers shot better than 60% from the floor and defeated Georgia 79-71. Fred Albers, WSFA TV Sports.
Standing tall over the countryside of West Montgomery County is the Alabama Forestry Commission's Cantaloupe Tower, focal point of efforts to control woods fires in the Commission's District 10, which extends roughly from Montgomery eastward to the Georgia line. Actually, the tower is empty these days, but in the small building at its base, Van Ingram and others handle reports of fires across the district and dispatch units to fight those which are uncontrolled. The red phone rings when someone dials the District 10 toll-free number, 1-800-392-5679. Callers can report fires, check out plans for controlled burns, or get the latest fire danger rating. Toll-free numbers for other districts in the state are available through local Forestry Commission offices. In addition to plotting the fires of the day and where the firefighters are, Cantaloupe personnel also gather the information necessary for determining the fire danger rating for central Alabama.
Each morning, the county rangers from throughout the district, they call in and give us the readiness level, and that usually runs from a 1 to a 5. And we determine our readiness level, fire danger rating from there.
And the readiness level, is that a gauge of how ready the forest is to burn, or does that take into account weather conditions too?
That's more or less the condition of the fuel on the ground in the forest, the fuel that's in the forest.
And then do you add other factors into that, wind speed and so on?
Yes, the wind speed has a lot to do with it, the clouds, the sunshine.
This tower, like many others across the state, is no longer in use for spotting wildfires. The Alabama Forestry Commission is using aircraft to do that job. But as we've seen downstairs in the building below, they are quite busy keeping track of fires across the state. You can help ease their workload and, better yet, help protect Alabama's forest lands by being sure to contact your local forestry ranger when you're about to do some burning, and we'll help you decide when you want to do burning by giving you each night on TV 12's weathercast the fire danger rating. I'm Dan Atkinson with WeatherBeat.
The best financing for your house is going to depend on your individual financial situation. There are many financial plans available, and they should be explored to find the best plan for you. Financing plans run the spectrum from banking arrangements to savings and loan to FHA and VA to owner financing packages. You can seek advice from a competent agent or mortgage broker. Normally, GI financing is more favorable than most. Check with the VA to see if you're entitled to it. And FHA should be explored to see if you qualify for any of their special or subsidy programs. Something to remember is that interest paid on your house constitutes a credit at income tax time. Here are some things that should appear in your purchase agreement: a legal description, the exact amount of the purchase price, including any equity, existing financing, or new financing. Also, the contract should be subject to your being able to obtain financing. The cost of financing can be paid by the buyer or seller, and you should be aware of who is paying the cost. It should be agreed that the seller is to furnish you with an updated abstract of title and warranty deed. The contract should state who will pay the agent's commission and how much it is. It should state the taxes and insurance accounts are up to date on the house. The contract should specify who pays loan closing costs and how much they are. A possession clause would protect you, incidentally, against the seller who holds over after the closing date. In the event that the contract is not consummated, your liability, as well as the seller, should be specified. And all existing equipment and fixtures, like lights or draperies that remain a part of the property, should be included in the contract. In considering your closing cost, you should know that it is required that the agent provide you with an estimated closing cost sheet. And who pays the agent or financing company involved with a closing attorney should be in writing prior to the signing of the contract. It's extremely important to get costs itemized and determine who's going to pay them. In figuring your closing costs, look for attorney's fees, a deed recording fee, loan brokerage fees, mortgage transfer fees, and loan discount charges. You're going to be primarily interested in the amount of money that you have to part with now and later on down the road. You don't want it to be more than necessary, so be sure and keep these facts in mind. This is Coping, and I'm Ivy Berman.
Sure are pretty.
This is a WSFA TV News special report.
Good afternoon. The Montgomery County Grand Jury has indicted several people in connection with the reported probe of the Public Service Commission. Standing by live down at the county courthouse is Dennis Latham. Dennis?
Just a few moments ago, Montgomery County District Attorney Jimmy Evans announced the return of the 2 indictments against the South Central Bell Telephone Company official James A. Mayberry. The 2 indictments charge Mayberry with inciting someone to commit a felony under the statutes of the state, providing with the state ethics law. It also mentions Cecil Dupree, the president of Graceba Telephone Company in Ashford, Alabama, as being a participant, along with Ralph McLemore, the former president of the Alabama Public Service Commission. According to Evans, about 2 o'clock this afternoon, Mayberry came, appeared, made his bond, and was released on $5,000 bonds for both counts. There is information going around that other indictments are still to come. Mr. Evans would not comment on those, saying he did not wish to prejudice the case against any of the defendants. He did say that the Montgomery County Grand Jury will continue its investigations into the Public Service Commission, and he expects more action at a later time. Live from the county courthouse, Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Thank you, Dennis. That is the indictments of 3 individuals in connection with the probe of the Public Service Commission, including the former executive secretary of the PSC. More details tonight at 6. I'm Chris Grimshaw.
This has been a WSFA TV News special report. We now return you to our regular programming.
It's called a free home inspection kit. The pamphlets are informative and easy to understand, covering everything from smoke detectors and kitchen fires to ways to prevent fires outdoors. Of course, there is a home fire checklist for you to use when you inspect your house or apartment. The checklist touches on the 4 sources of home fires: smoking, heating and cooking, electrical wiring, and storage. Also included are ways to protect your family. Sergeant Roy Campbell of the Montgomery Fire Department says the do-it-yourself inspection takes about 15 minutes to complete. You can write for the free kit to Sergeant Roy Campbell, care of the Montgomery Fire Department, P.O. Box 1111, Montgomery 36102. Sergeant Campbell adds a 15-minute home inspection could prevent a fire or save a life. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
According to the indictments, former PSC Executive Director Ralph McLemore was incited to accept sexual favors in June of last year from Mayberry and Cecil Dupree, president of Graceba Total Communications Incorporated. District Attorney Jimmy Evans says Mayberry was arrested this afternoon and released on $5,000 bond.
The particular felony section of the Alabama Ethics Act that is material prohibits employees of regulatory agencies, boards, or commission, in this case the Alabama Public Service Commission, from soliciting or accepting any gift or gratuity or thing of value or favor or service from a person associated with a business which is regulated by the Alabama Public Service Commission.
McLemore took over as PSC Executive Director in December of 1978 and resigned his post effective August 10th of last year. McLemore now works for Georgia Power in Marietta, Georgia. Neither McLemore nor Cecil Dupree were named in the indictments. One other indictment was returned, but the name wasn't released because the person named has not been taken into custody. Evans says the Montgomery County Grand Jury will continue its PSC investigation next week. He says more action is expected. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
None whatsoever. The dry counties still have their local options to vote themselves wet or dry. Will not affect dry counties 1 iota.
Support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of Alabama.
And the Constitution of the State of Alabama.
So long as I
have no motives other than to be the finance director and to be as good as I can in that role. The financial crisis in the state is bigger than anybody's political ambitions, and I would hope that it would be beyond political speculation on anybody's part. And there has been speculation that I wish simply to declare a few minutes. I want to get to work, frankly, because I found out I have an awful lot to do. Just a few questions. Don?
Somebody said that you were taking a job.
People in vocational education. If, however, you study the figures, you will find that as to what the governor's intentions in his education program for the next year and beyond are. That's a very sound way to approach school funding. The governor feels, first of all, that his average daily attendance business is an unnecessary bit of taking attendance for 80 days and adding and dividing a day over a given period in each system. It's the highest count that you can take to use net enrollment, and for every 22.7 students as to what the governor's intentions in his education program for the next year and beyond are. I think everything is self-explanatory, or most of the things explain themselves in the handouts. I would like to take the opportunity to talk with you about the proposed change in the minimum program law, if that's something that you'd be interested in hearing about. But we'll answer any questions that we can, and if we